Part 2 of Tom Dove versus Rafal Malczyk. I've just moved my bishop here, protecting the this pawn from the knight attack, also protecting this, and this is the most important pawn because it's protecting the or attacking the squares e6 and c6, which are very important in Black's camp, and keeping this cramp in his position. The bishop may look like a glorified pawn, but this is all part of my plan. I'm not going to try and blow him off the board with a bishop on a very attacking square. I'm quite happy to have this bishop just sitting here and performing those duties. So he hit out with e5, and immediately I'm thinking about maybe an f4 push, attacking his centre, but I decide to put that on a back burner for a few moves, and just build up on that f4 square to begin with this move, just developing a piece and allowing my king to get castled. I don't think there's any particular rush to play that f4 move. Perhaps I could have done it straight away. He moved his knight here, and immediately you can see the predicament Black's in a little bit. His knight hasn't got much of a future anywhere because of these pawns here cramping onto his position. This knight now has got one less square to go to. This knight is blocked in by this knight to go to any decent squares. If he comes here, he hasn't got really any future there. This knight is blocking in the bishop, which in turn is blocking in his rook. So his whole position is a little bit snarled up, and I want to keep it that way for as long as I can, and make life very uncomfortable for him. And hopefully he'll end up doing something a little bit rash to try and break free from that this pressure. So I just castle, and now I really am ready to hit out with f4, and he moved his queen here, possibly to add a bit of protection to this backward pawn, which is now not, after this e5 move, is no longer protected by anything. It's a backward pawn, and backward pawns are very vulnerable to attack. In the Benoni, this is a very vulnerable pawn, but it's notoriously difficult to get to in order to exploit its vulnerability, if that makes sense. So I think the best way I can do it is to hit out with this f5 pawn, f4 pawn, get my bishop on that square there and attack it. That's really what I'm planning on doing. But again, I'm not in any great rush. My primary aim is just to keep Black pinned down. So I hit out with f4 here, and he moves his knight to the edge of the board, hitting out at this f4 and putting more pressure on here. I think he's perhaps wants me to take this pawn so he can put his knight on there, and suddenly his position's looking a bit more free. And obviously because of that, I don't really want that to happen. I might even entertain ideas of f5 opening up the position there. So I play a4. Now this is often seen as a white plan against the Benoni. White knows that the Benoni player is going to want to expand on the queen side with these pawns, and this a4 move, possibly going to a5, is going to just prevent that from happening. This steamroller. If Black can get these pawns going, it can be very difficult to stop. So this is just that's what that move's all about. You'll often see it in other games as well, and if you ever do see it, chances are that's what the move's all about. He plays f6 here. He obviously wants to add support to his centre. He doesn't really want this pawn to have to be moved, which would give me a protected pass pawn, which could be potentially bad news for him. So I move my bishop to d2. It's just slightly improving my position. It's nothing fantastic, but it's because I've now moved this bishop, these two rooks are communicating, and the bishop is now protecting this pawn and protecting that pawn still. So just a slight improvement, and I'm maintaining this cramp position on black's position. Now black, I don't know if I've already said, black is going to be wanting to alleviate this cramping position. The best way he can do that is to swap off his minor pieces for my minor pieces, and the more minor pieces he's able to swap off, the less cramped his position is going to be for his remaining pieces. And once all those pieces are off, the Benoni pawn structure is quite well known for being good in the end game. It scores quite highly for black against this pawn structure we have here for white. So I have to be very careful that any swaps I do allow are because it's advantageous to me that I'm kind of punishing black for swapping off. I want to get my pieces on better squares. If there's no advantage at all, I'm going to avoid swapping. Okay, so that's the two plans as far as the swapping off is concerned. Rafal castled here. I'm quite happy to see him castle this side. I think it's going to be very difficult for him to get defenders over to his king side now. He's got this one here and this one here. His queen's out on a limb, not doing a great deal. This knight here is now got even fewer squares to go to since the move f6 and this rook now here. So it's even more cramped his position for the moment. I move to h6. I don't want to do anything that's going to alleviate the cramp in any way, and I'm encouraging him to just do something a little bit silly, and eventually he decides, look, enough's enough, he needs to do something, and he takes this pawn, which I don't know if it's the best idea. I take back, he takes, and now I am hitting this d6 pawn, which is one of my main plans against the Benoni, to target this backward pawn. Now Rafal would have perhaps been better just to drop this knight in here from the move he actually came up with, which was this move. Though maybe he was thinking, if he does move here and I take with the bishop, either of these pawn moves isn't fantastically ideal, because one would open up the f file to my rook, and the other, if he went this way, would give me a protected passed pawn perhaps. But so maybe that being his logic, he tried to chase my bishop away before he did put his knight in this hole here. But immediately that set alarm bells off in my head. Something just doesn't look right here, and so I spent a little bit of time just wondering if there's anything better than dropping my bishop back. And immediately I'm thinking, well, if he did take my bishop and I took back with my rook, well, that's a hell of a powerful piece to be trained on his king. So instantly I'm not really that concerned about that bishop leaving the board now. In addition to that, because he's moved this pawn here, he's opened up a pathway to this vulnerable pawn that's only protected by the king. As I say, none of his other pieces are in any fit state to rush over and defend. So this move here looks increasingly like a bit of a killer blow. And he started looking a bit uncomfortable in his seat, I've got to say, and I think he realises his position's starting to fall apart quite dramatically after this move. He declined the offer of the bishop sacrifice and took back with his pawn, but this just allowed me to infiltrate his position with this check here and get my queen in. And now the idea is quite simple, just to get a mating net with the queen here, move the bishop out of the way once the queen's there, discover check, and then deliver a checkmate here. So that is a massive threat. So he tried to swap queens by moving the pawn out of the way, but unfortunately for him, it's quite a simple threat to nullify by just d6. It completely blocks off the queen's path to my queen. Obviously, he can't move his rook down here because that would be checkmate. So he's really in a desperate trouble here now. But I've got to proceed with caution. He's a very, very good player, and he's not going to just take this line down. So he takes the bishop. I don't see there's much else he can do. The queen comes here, threatening a discovered attack. He moves his rook here, hoping that this will offer adequate protection. But this shows that really this rook's next to useless, really. King comes here, rook gets chopped off, and now the end is very close. This pawn here is going to add support to my queen by being able to check at some point. So I can't really use just my queen to deliver a checkmate, because he'll be able to run away, and it might even end up in a draw. So I need to get one of my rooks into the attack, and it's very easy to do that. I've got a very inviting open file here. It doesn't matter which rook I use. I'm ready to bring that into the game now. And at this point, Rafal resigned in view of the fact that this is looking horrible for him now. He can't take this pawn with his queen as he might like, because check, he loses that queen as a result. And really, this is going to be shooting fish in a barrel from this point on. So there you go. That was the end of the game. So there's a few points to take from it. Obviously, I hope you're a bit more familiar with the ideas for both black and white in the Benoni. And I really do hope that you go away and start taking it a bit more seriously than perhaps I did. Maybe you start bringing it as part of your repertoire, and just general ideas how effective this cramping effect has been throughout this game. Maybe you'd like to experiment with that yourself. And also, if you ever find yourself in a cramp, just bear in mind the easiest way to, or the best way to get out of it, is to swap off pieces and get more space available for your remaining pieces. So I think that's really quite some valuable lessons there. Okay, thank you, and I'll see you next time.